Our headline stories. Facebook moves to compete with popular app Clubhouse. The social networking company is introducing new features that will give users more audio-only options. And that's not all. While the news of Ghana being chosen as Twitter's African headquarters is still fresh, yet another multinational technology company has announced that it will be setting up its African headquarters soon. It's a business tech conversation today on the show. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Facebook is introducing new features for its users. Now, these features include live audio rooms, sound bites, and more. Audio-only networks have become increasingly popular from the time of the pandemic and lockdowns. The features will be launched over the next few months, at first with a small number of creators. Users will be able to make money in the live audio rooms or with sound bites, though it is unclear if this will be available to everyone or just reserved for creators with large followings. Facebook will also allow users to listen to podcasts directly from the app. Around the time that Facebook announced this, another social media website, Reddit, announced Reddit Talk, its version of Clubhouse. Now, joining me is Victor Ekwealor. He is a tech entrepreneur and analyst, and we're going to get into this issue and more. Victor, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much.
So let's start with numbers. In this kind of conversations, I like a numbers game. 2.80 billion monthly active users use Facebook. It also has 1.84 billion users that visit the social networking sites on a daily basis. Facebook is the leading social media platform, reaching 59.0% of social media users. And we can all see with those numbers, it is a behemoth. And if you can't buy it, which is what Facebook tries to do, then you outcompete it. Is Facebook merely being competitive, or is it entering into antitrust territory that it's been previously accused of?
Thank you very much. There is a lot of nuances in this conversation that we have to put into consideration when addressing issues like this. The law has its own standpoints on matters like this, which are regulatory and very correct to a very large extent. But there is a stance I have, and it's the fact that laws and regulations have become very outdated for the pace of technology. Technology and innovation are moving faster than the law can keep up with. And this is a thing, So there are a lot of nuances that makes it very impossible for us to say, oh, Facebook is good or bad, There was a recent documentary on Netflix that talks about the evils of social media and the internet. And I think that opinions like that can be a little bit extremist, because when you think about it, social media and the internet have been net positive. They definitely have their downsides. They have a lot of disadvantages. But truth be told, there are more nuances in conversation. Can these social media companies, and Facebook specifically, do better? Yes, They have a lot of work to do in terms of, guidelines, making their platform safer and, less predatory. There's a lot of work to be done on that front, but too big, I don't know. It's more nuanced than a straightforward answer.
All right, so we will get into some of those nuances because there are some lawsuits that Facebook has been facing. But let's even look at these audio-only apps. Now, Clubhouse has come out. It's available on one platform for now, but it's being worked on. And these are apps that really sort of, got a lot of ground during the pandemic, during the lockdown. What made them so popular at that point in time? From a tech standpoint, what helped these audio-only apps like Clubhouse gain ground when we already had the Twitters, we had the Facebooks, we had the Instagrams, even at the time of the lockdown and the restrictions?
Pandemic fatigue is one of the biggest accelerators for audio-only social media platforms. Most of them have been around for a long time. And over the years, a lot of them have come into play and, didn't exactly achieve product market fit. But thanks to the pandemic, people have become more, attuned to talking. It's a need for conversation. People want to feel more connected beyond the, interface of just typing, sending out text and all that kind of stuff. The pandemic, to a very large extent, accelerated audio-only social media platforms. Also, there is the fact that over the years, if you've noticed, audio as a media format has picked up more. Podcasts, people listen to podcasts more. And like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, actually, podcasting and listening to podcasts was a very niche thing. It was one of those status signaling thing, like, oh, do you listen to X podcast? But now everybody and your sister has a podcast, everybody has a podcast. Like most of my friends have a podcast. I'm the only person that does not have a podcast now, Yes. So I
have a podcast, Victor, so I feel a little bit triggered.
I mean, but yes, I think that audio listenership and audio in media has gained a lot of ground in recent years, and that has helped to a very large extent. But one of the biggest accelerants of the Clubhouse is there is Discord too. Discord used to be for only gamers, if I'm correct, but recently they are adapting to be for everybody. So the pandemic fatigue is the biggest accelerant for growth and adoption.
Okay, so bear with me for this Facebook question next. So we know that the company has come under a lot of fire in the past few years. Its purchase of Instagram and WhatsApp is actually being reviewed by the American Federal Trade Commission. And in December of last year, the company was sued by the FTC and 46 out of 50 states in the U.S. on antitrust grounds. Now, these suits allege that Facebook's acquisition strategy has been designed to eliminate competition, specifically accusing Facebook's acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp as being illegal. The suits are also asking courts to prevent Facebook from acquiring anything worth over $10 million while the case is pending. A separate FTC lawsuit is trying to force Facebook to also spin off WhatsApp and Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg, as we know, has had to appear before panels and committees at the U.S. Senate. So this is a multi-layered conversation. Let's start with this. They're saying Facebook is too big, should be barred from being able to buy anything over 10 million, I think thereabouts, for the time that this case is on. But you have some of these apps that are, for the whole purpose of the founders, is to get the attention of a company like Facebook and to be, purchased, and then they move on to the next creation. What happens in this sort of lifespan, in this sort of a cycle of some of these apps where the whole thing they want is to be purchased by a bigger player?
That's a very valid point. And it's a point that is usually not in discussion when we talk about things like this. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that these lawmakers have very valid concerns, about, antitrust issues and whatnot. Okay, let me go back a bit. I think it was last year or last 2 years when conversations started heating up around these social media companies, Facebook specifically. They started having this run-ins to regulators. Mark began appearing, the EU and the United States Senate and all that kind of stuff. And I went back to do a little bit digging, and I found out that this is something that is common knowledge, that even back in the day, the IBMs, Microsoft, every company that has gotten very big, that has gotten to unicorn status or has grown very big, has had this conversation with regulators about, antitrust issues, split up and all that kind of stuff. I think these people have valid concerns, but I think that these laws are not very much suited to the realities of innovation. Because like you said now, how startup ecosystems typically work is when, as a founder, you're building, you're solving a problem, and you're thinking in your head that, there's an exit strategy for you. It's either you IPO, you do an IPO, or you sell, to a bigger company, a bigger tech company, and they acquire and you go to work for them. And this has become a part of the mechanism of, startups. And tech startups and innovation has become a very large part of our lives. So I think these things should be put into consideration when, regulators look at technology from an antitrust perspective. Like I said, I don't think Facebook can, be measured from the right or wrong yardstick because yes, they are wrong on a lot of counts. But when it comes to this antitrust issue specifically, I don't know. So I don't know the specifics, I don't know the details of, the law and everything. But from an overarching perspective, there is the impression that these things can be better tailored,
Yes. Okay.
You can't just ask Facebook to break up, to go your way because X, Y, Z and all that kind of stuff. Yes.
We'll see what happens. 46 states out of 50. It's only remaining 4 states in the US before every state in the US is actually suing them. But on the flip side of that question I just asked you, how then do smaller companies survive against companies such as Facebook? If we're saying that people like Facebook and time immemorial for many countries and companies has been some sort of an acquisition strategy, what about those who don't want to be acquired? But now they have to stand against those who have the money to almost in a way to 100% replicate what they offer. Replicates what they're putting out there, and they're able to do that to a larger audience. So what then happens to the industry? What then happens to the sector? Because in terms of that, at the end of the day, it's also consumers that don't get the best because it's one person controlling, one person sort of dominating. How do smaller companies then survive if they decide they don't want to be acquired?
So this whole hegemony is not good for the users, like you rightly mentioned. You have just one company, and there's no space for difference in service offerings. For instance, to a very large extent, not a lot of companies will be able to compete on the social media front. For ride-hailing, nobody will say they want to seriously compete in the ride-hailing front. You have to have, it becomes very harder, for these companies to play. And like you rightly said, they don't have the wherewithal, to play on a level playing field. I think that this is what lawmakers should be concerned with, put laws in place that take care of the underdogs, the little guys that are coming up, and like, okay, how do we look out for their best interests? How do we force this kind of thing? So this argument to a very large extent this might be a very bad example, but a lot of people say, gather the whole billionaires in the whole world, take their money together, give everybody. $1 million, and when you think about it, in number of years, this money is still going to pull back to a particular, source. It's still going to come in a lump sum to somebody or some group of people. It's the way capitalism works. Basically, And if you dismantle a Facebook, for instance, dismantle a Microsoft, in the next 5-10 years, there is going to be another company like that that's going to come up with something big and going to dominate the whole space. Do you keep doing that? That is it's a zero-sum strategy to a very large extent, and it's not sustainable. That's the problem,
Okay.
So like I said, back in the day, it was IBM and Microsoft. Today, it's Facebook. Tomorrow, who is it going to be? It's a very zero-sum strategy. I think that the focus should be on leveling the playing ground. What do we put in place to make sure these people are able to compete favorably?
All right. So, Victor, let's hold on because we're going to go now to who else is coming to the continent after Twitter announced that Ghana is going to be the site of their African headquarters. But before we go on a break, I want to leave the audience with this. If Facebook was a country, it would be substantially bigger than China. The size of Facebook's user base translates to almost 3 in every 7 people of the global population. But while we're focusing on Facebook, as I said earlier, Reddit has introduced Reddit Talk and Twitter has introduced Spaces. So it's not just Facebook that's looking into the audio-only aspect of features. We're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, guess who the new player in the tech space on the continent is? We'll have the details. Now, Cape Town, South Africa has announced that Amazon will open up its Africa headquarters in a new development in the city. The municipality has approved a 15-hectare parcel of land for development at the cost of 4 billion rand. Currently, the retail firm operates its Amazon Prime Video and AWS business in South Africa, but does not offer its retail services. South Africans who buy goods on its website have to pay for international shipping and import fees. but it's not immediately clear if retail services will be added to those on offer in South Africa or across the continent. Still with me is tech entrepreneur and analyst Victor Ekwealor. Victor, so this is coming on the heels of Twitter announcing that they are opening their African headquarters in Ghana. So what's bringing all these companies to us? And I think the part of that would also be to us now at this point in time.
Africa is the new frontier for economic growth, whether anybody believes it or not. Africa is the new frontier for economic growth. Africa is the new frontier for the internet. And this connotes a lot of things. There is the population factor. Africa has the youngest demographic in the world, and it's only going to get younger over the next few years compared to the aging population of other parts of the world, the continent, America, Europe, and other places. And to a very large extent, most of these people are, so when you think about the frontier, it's like, oh, we've covered other parts of the world, we've conquered other parts of the world. It's time to come to this new market where there is not a lot of competition, and come and build something new here and innovate. That's it fundamentally.
Okay, so when we see the companies like Amazon and Twitter, Google and all, and we saw a bit of what Twitter was saying, they talked about Ghana's democracy, they talked about, youth and all of that. Particularly, this is a business decision. So what are these businesses looking at that influences their decisions on the countries that they decide to use as a base of their African operations?
So like Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey said, to a very large extent, things like freedom of speech or the perception of it sends a very strong signal, and there is the stability of regulations. In Africa, to a very large extent, regulations are one of the biggest hindrances or obstacles to innovation, to building businesses, tech-enabled businesses. But the truth is, in some places, it's easier than others, and there's also the fact that so there's the ease of doing business to a very large extent, the ease of doing business, the fear of not waking up one day and not having a business because of a, new regulation or something. Those are some of the things that these companies look at when they decide on where to set up.
Okay. Well, we know that unemployment is a gain. What else is there? Anything else that we gain from having these companies really sort of put a branch, as it may be, or put an African or continental headquarters in specific countries? Besides employing young Africans, what is there for us to gain?
So I don't think that employment is the biggest advantage of this presence on the continent, because to a very large extent, Africans are becoming young people from Africa are becoming very skilled in, tech, becoming some of the best, tech skilled people in the world, actually, and they're getting very better. And even before now, most of them have gotten jobs and are getting jobs outside the continent, Facebook, and you have like accelerators like Andela that enable this acceleration to a very large extent. So without these companies coming to Africa, young Africans will be employed in tech, without even migrating from the continent. That's the beauty of technology. I think that the long tail effect of the presence here or the interest in Africa is the most important. And one of the biggest is the development of the digital economy, digital economy, digital infrastructure. When you think about, so I'm going to use Facebook for example. Facebook over the years has, brought up a lot of digital skills acquisition programs. Facebook has tried to, build internet services, and even Google has had one of the biggest digital skills programs on the continent. Now, the way most of these companies think about it is that for this populace to be able to use the technology that you bring, you have to empower them to do this. Empowering them, physically in terms of knowledge, empowering them with infrastructure, internet, and all that kind of stuff. And when you think about it, Facebook's internet, I don't think is free. Google has, I think, discontinued their free internet service.
Free Wi-Fi spaces,
Yes, they've discontinued it. But like the effects of this thing can cannot be, overestimated. And I think these long tail effects are some of the biggest advantages to the continent.
Okay.
The employment thing will happen with or without them, actually.
Okay. So who do you think we can expect next in terms of establishing a physical presence on the continent? So we're seeing Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Twitter is here. Who should we be looking at? Or are we sort of, presenced out in terms of the larger players in this space?
Actually, it's very hard to say. So over the last 2 years, Jack Dorsey has been interested in, Nigeria and Africa as a whole, and most of it has been because of, the proliferation of cryptocurrency on the continent. That was a signal to a very large extent that, Twitter might be interested in Africa. But apart from that, it's actually really hard to say because, setting up in Africa is not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that these companies that are here are, it's business. They're not doing anybody a favor per se, but it's not the easiest thing. Let's not go into details. It's not the easiest thing to do. So I can't say that, everybody is going to rush here in the nearest future. But again, on the other hand, like I said, Africa is the new frontier of the internet. So let's just keep our fingers crossed. It's going to be, I know like in the next few years, it's going to be a very packed, rush.
A packed space. All right, yes. Victor, let's leave it at that. Africa is the new frontier for digital business. And of course, they're not doing anyone a favor. It is, at the end of the day, business. Victor, thank you so much for joining me for the first time on Business Edge. We look forward to having you back once again.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, have a great day. Okay, as we wrap things up, we give you a few stories we're keeping our eyes on, and we start in West Africa, where Nigeria's manufacturing sector recorded further decline as the CBN Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index for January was 44.9 index points. That's 4.7 points lower than the 49.6 index points recorded in December of 2020. Now, moving on from Nigeria, the Kenya Revenue Authority says it will appeal a court order that temporarily barred it from collecting minimum tax from businesses. The Commissioner for Legal Services at the KRA said that the tax agency will seek an early date for hearing of a case on May 19th before the second installment of the minimum tax falls due. And we move from there. We're back in Nigeria, where the external reserves soared to $35.254 billion from April 1st to $34.845 billion in April 16, gaining $409 million, according to the latest figures from the Central Bank of Nigeria. And finally, the APSA Group Board and the Group Chief Executive have come to an agreement pursuant to which he has stepped down as Director and Group Chief Executive, and he will be leaving the group with effect from the 30th of April 2021. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. As always, thank you for joining us. Follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. We have a website and a YouTube channel that keeps you up to date with any of the shows and conversations you may have missed. And we are also mobile. Find our app, download it, and keep us with you wherever you go. I'm Tolulakwe Adeleru Balogun. I'll see you again soon.